Hello and welcome to iBuzz. I'm your host Nosheen Bukhari, bringing you the latest and most exciting entertainment news from showbiz world. It's Robert Dinero's birthday month, and so today we will be paying him a birthday tribute, followed by a movie review on Shape of Water. But first things first, let me quickly take you to the top stories of the day. Britney Spears' father steps down as conservator. Celebrating years of excellence with Robert Dinero's 77th birthday. Lord of the Rings, Amazon moves show to UK from New Zealand. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, release of film featuring Tom Hardy delayed. And Kelly Clarkson requests last name be reinstated amid divorce proceedings. Robert Anthony De Niro is an American actor, producer, and director. He's particularly known for his 9 collaborations with filmmaker Martin Scorsese and is the recipient of various accolades. To pay him a birthday tribute, we're joined by film critic Mayank Shekhar. Mayank, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Nosheen.
So Mayank, an institute in himself, what would you say about Robert De Niro and his great services to the cinema world?
I think you put it right, an institution by himself. I think if you see his contribution to acting as a craft, as a cinematic craft, he was very different from the people that he followed. Of course, the only person who comes to mind before him in that tradition would be Marlon Brando. In terms of trained actors who used method acting that became, of course, a much derided term later, but to become a character, to literally live that life, to convince audiences that what you're seeing on screen is actually the person who exists off screen too. That level of dedication to the craft. There were very few actors, but there, over years, and De Niro would be one of the few in the beginning for sure. 70s when he came in is roughly what a lot of people perhaps rightly believe is the golden age of Hollywood in terms of how gritty realism entered what was otherwise, a larger-than-life scenario in the American film industry. And they brought in that grittiness with some fantastic directors. And as you rightly mentioned, Scorsese and De Niro's collaboration, I think, will go down in history as one of the greatest actor-director collaborations ever.
And his first collaboration with Scorsese was Mean Streets in 1973, where he played small-time criminal Johnny Boy. And then the following year brought him a huge luck package in the form of Godfather 2. That won him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, which is a jackpot for him. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I've had the great fortune of actually interviewing Robert De Niro. Great chance and great luck, of course. And not just De Niro alone, but De Niro with Al Pacino.
Yes.
And these are two people that you, of course, remember besides Brando from The Godfather as a
great
trilogy.
Duo,
And these two were in the same film, but of course, they did not share screen space in Godfather 2. But it was very clear to people at the time, to audience at the time, that they're looking at two of the greatest actors in history of Hollywood, for sure. And De Niro and Pacino have been neck and neck for many years as contemporaries, as rivals, and they eventually did Heat together, where they actually shared screen, that one particular scene where they're together in the coffee shop sequence, and that remains again embossed as a landmark moment in history too. So yes, Godfather is a turning point, but as I mentioned before, I think it's collaboration that began with Mean Street, but really hit the highest possible note with Taxi Driver, and that's the collaboration with Scorsese that we're talking about, is genuinely something that's not been surpassed since. I think Taxi Driver as a film in terms of the impact on popular culture, and then thereafter with Scorsese, De Niro did this film called The King of Comedy. Now you take Taxi Driver's role and you take King of Comedy's role, you merge them, you get a film that was one of the one of the greatest films in the recent years called Joker that Todd Phillips made recently a couple of years back, which won a series of Oscars as well. Now those roles have been so timeless that they can be repeated all over decades later, and that's really been De Niro's contribution to cinema. The fact that a lot of his parts, a lot of his films can be watched again and again.
Yes,
they don't seem to age, and they certainly don't seem to age, or even if they do age, they seem to age really well.
Right. And of course, there are other genres that he worked in, but he got stamped for crime drama, especially those by Scorsese. I would really like you to talk about his blockbusters like Goodfellas, The Irishman, Heat, and Casino.
Absolutely. I think if you just take the crime genre, and especially with a film like Goodfellas, which again, I was watching it recently, it's incredible how relevant it seems, how none of the polish has worn off that film, although it's decades old. And, and there was a sense that perhaps, De Niro is sort of getting into a certain mold, which he got out of for many, many years, and he returned with Casino, and then after many, many years again, he came back with Irishman, which is hardly 2 or 3 years old. And that's a film that's almost a culmination of his career, because you see the crime genre evolve from a young man's life into a middle-aged man, into a really old man. And in a sense, what you're really looking at is De Niro and Scorsese as artists over the same years. And of course, the fact that they've also invented this technology where in Irishman, you can see a younger De Niro in the film itself. They managed to make him much younger than he actually looks through VFX and other technologies. I mean, it's fantastic to actually see an entire career pan out through the genre of crime in a film which exists outside of his life, obviously. So I think Irishman, I still believe, and I think people will discover it far more in the coming years, is a deeply underrated film. And I think once the younger lot discovers Irishman, they go back to see, a Goodfellas, or they go back to see a Casino. They'll really relive the master that both Scorsese and De Niro have been.
Absolutely. Mike, how would you like to describe his portrayal as a comedian, as he has appeared in a lot of comedy movies like Dirty Grandpa and a few others?
Well, I think in a certain way, there is a certain, detached comic timing that De Niro has that he uses to incredible effect. He's not your, one-liner slapstick sort of comedian. He's more of a relaxed kind of a guy, which is what you saw a lot of in his later career. To see films like even like Analyze This, you'll see moments of it, and then he got into this entire franchise of the Meet the Parents, Meet the Paupers. There was the whole 3 films that he did, which is all of like an older man's comedy. You can't take that away from him at all. But I have to say, I think De Niro really shines when he's that gruesome, extremely a serious a man on screen. And I think what we've not spoken about in that respect, and also in terms of dedication to a particular role, it has to be Raging Bull. I mean, that's another film, unfortunately not available in any of the platforms, at least in the subcontinent at the moment. Because I wanted to watch Raging Bulls recently, because so many boxing films are coming out, with the new releases lately. But I couldn't find Raging Bull again. But you have strong memories of that fantastic film. And the way he pulled off, the way he transformed himself is something that people are doing in 2021. But this man did it like back in the 80s, and it was the first time that someone was taking that much care into transforming for a particular part. And De Niro was right there as a pioneer in many ways.
Absolutely. But sadly, the industry is coming short on actors like De Niro, who are known for their dialogue delivery and facial expressions rather than getting involved in too much action and thrill. Of course, he has worked in movies like Run-In, but he kept his value of acting on top of everything. How would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I think over the past decade and a half, you see the kind of route that Hollywood has taken, which is essentially find, the lowest common denominator audience across the world with what are usually, blast fests and superhero franchise, where they've completely delinked the cult of the hero, the cult of the star, which is what, guys like, Pacino or De Niro were back in the day, and that's what they started in a certain sense with directors like De Palma, directors like Scorsese, of course, directors like Coppola. I mean, these are the people who brought in new Hollywood, and then we're back into what are essentially just pure popcorn films, and which is and it was very befitting in a certain way that Scorsese actually called these movies not even movies; he called them theme park adventures, and he took The Irishman and he actually played it, premiered it or made it with Netflix. But I think that's where the real drama is. That's where the real action is. That's where the great performances are.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, the OTT platforms have come to rescue, and thankfully also they've come up with libraries, that pre-existing libraries. So no one has an excuse but to really use this opportunity of De Niro's birthday coming up on August 17th to do a complete binge of various De Niro films to just see, if you're much younger and you haven't had a chance to, just see what the fuss is about, and you won't be disappointed.
Right. By wishing him a very happy birthday, Mike, I'm going to have to thank you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Noshi.
That was Mayank Shekhar paying a birthday tribute to the birthday boy, Robert Dinero. And now moving to other story details. Britney Spears' father, Jamie, says he's willing to step down from his role in his conservatorship when the time is right, according to court documents filed on Thursday. For years, the pop star has pushed to remove her father from the court-appointed arrangement that has controlled her career and finances for 13 years. Mr. Spears is willing to step down when the time is right, but the transition needs to be orderly and include a resolution of matters pending before the court, the filing said. Technology giant Amazon's TV and film business is moving production of its multi-million-dollar Lord of the Rings series to the UK from New Zealand. The as-yet untitled fantasy epic is set thousands of years before the events in J.R.R. Tolkien's book, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The company said the move was part of a plan to expand its production space and consolidate its footprint in the UK. The release of superhero sequel Venom, There Be Carnage, has been delayed by nearly a month to mid-October as the United States grapples with a new wave of COVID-19 infections. The movie starring Tom Hardy as the Marvel Comics character will now debut in theaters on October 15th instead of September 24th, Sony Pictures said via email. Kelly Clarkson has reportedly given an official request to have her legal name restored amid divorce proceedings. The report has been brought forward by an online magazine, and according to its findings, the petitioner requests restoration of the former name as set forth in the proposed judgment. The singer is requesting a default judgment on her case and has even asked for the finalization of her divorce, according to the outlet. Clarkson filed for divorce in the June of 2020 and has already petitioned to be declared legally single. That is it from our newsroom. We will be right back after a quick short break with a movie review. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's review time, and in today's episode, we will review the 2017 release, Shape of Water. Alyssa, a lonely janitor, stumbles upon an amphibious creature that is held captive in a secret research facility. She then develops a unique relationship with the creature. To review the movie, we're joined by actor and podcaster Mary Palmer. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. Delighted to be here.
Thank you, Mary. So, a work of science molded in art. How would you describe the idea that this movie revolves around?
So I think it's just a really different take on a classic love story. You know, Eliza is almost like the princess waiting to be rescued, and obviously the creature is the person that allows her to find her place in society and ultimately find love.
Mm-hmm. And this film is crafted beautifully yet complex but simple at the same time. What are your thoughts on this?
So I think it has all the hallmarks of a Guillermo del Toro movie. You know, there's lots of magic realism. You really have to suspend your belief for a lot of the sequences. And obviously there's the creature art as well, you know, beautifully realised by Doug Jones. And I think it's something that really brings the imagination to life. It's not what you would expect from a typical love story, but it's fantastic the way that it's done.
Right. And I would like you to comment on Sally Hawkins' portrayal of a mute lady, that how remarkably she performed it.
Oh, absolutely. There's obviously no dialogue whatsoever. So the
Yeah.
performance relies on, a look or a touch, and she realizes this so beautifully. Like her eyes are incredibly expressive,
Yeah.
and that's, how she emotes with her colleagues in the film, and it's perfectly done.
Yes, and the sign language, of course, it's not easy to learn. Most of the times when you make a mistake, you're pinpointed for that. But this movie absolutely delivered the perfect sign language that one can, feel flawless.
Yes, I think so. I think a lot of effort went into getting it right. The whole point of this story is that, the characters in it are people on the periphery of life, and so often that's how it can feel as a deaf or a mute person. And so the attention to detail is really spot on.
Absolutely. Doug Jones, Octavia Spencer, and Michael Shannon are the elements that complete the movie. How did you find their roles?
So Michael Shannon is one of my favourite movie villains, as it were. He always plays a really good bad guy, and in this he's no different. He is suited and booted, and yet he is so aggressive and so violent, and just a character you can really love to hate, as it were. And Octavia Spencer is perfect as always. She provides so much life in comparison to Sally Hawkins' character, who is obviously silent for the majority of the film.
Right. And Doug Jones, with all that makeup on, he still manages to, act perfectly and give the expressions that are required for his character.
He's fantastic. The creature still manages to emote, and he is more relatable and empathetic than Michael Shannon's character, for example. So yeah, Doug Jones is, has worked with Guillermo del Toro previously and performed creature art for him, and here it's just another excellent performance.
Yes. And how would you like to comment on the setting of this movie, where they, tried to depict 1940s and 1950s? How would you like to comment on that?
So I think it's realised in a way that's really beautiful. The film actually looks like an old-fashioned movie, and obviously halfway through you have that kind of dance dream sequence, which really contributes to that. It almost makes you feel like you're watching Singing in the Rain. And I think Del Toro's just making a point that at that time, society was really divided. There was a lot of, segregation, but all these characters find their voice and find their story in a time where otherwise they would be on the periphery.
Yes. Mary, the movie won 4 Academy Awards, including the Best Picture and the Best Music. So there's no second thought on the Best Picture, but how about the music? What are your thoughts on the music for Shape of Water?
Oh, the score is so rich. I actually listen to it quite a lot when I'm working. Alexandre Desplat, who did the score, I think he also did the score for The King's Speech. It's really rich, it's really sumptuous, and really captures the era that the film was trying to portray. It's very, very dreamlike for a lot of the movie, and it contributes to this kind of fantastical love story.
Right. Mary, there are like very mixed reviews at the end for this movie. Some say that fantasy and imagination are beyond human logic. So if you want to really enjoy a piece of art, keep your logic aside for some time while watching this movie. What would you say about that?
Do you know, I can't disagree with that. As I said, there's not every film that you see where a woman falls in love with a giant fish, but you do just get swept up in this love story, or certainly I did. And I went into it knowing that it wasn't going to be a traditional love story. And I think as long as you're happy to put that aside, these characters draw you in so much that it's hard not to fall in love with them and get swept up in with what's happening.
Right. And Mary, would you want to comment on how the movie felt a little dragged? I mean, at some point, being a movie critic, would you like to comment that there was an element of dragging the movie and dragging the story where they could, keep it compact instead of stretching it?
I think it is quite a long runtime for a movie. We're getting more used to movies that are around the sort of 90 to 100-minute mark. But I think that when you watch a Guillermo del Toro movie, you expect that there's going to be a lot of detail, and perhaps where some people see that as dragging or labouring the point, I would argue that's him simply paying more attention to storylines or characters that he particularly wants to highlight to an audience.
Right, and being a critic, how would you like to comment on the cinematography?
I mean, it's absolutely stunning to look at. When you watch this movie, there's, so much rich color. When Eliza and Giles are in their apartment, it's all very dark and grey and brown. And then when she gets to the research facility and finally gets to meet the creature, all these beautiful teals and turquoises, and really bring the movie to life. And I think it's so well realised. And as I say, similar to the music, it has this dreamlike quality where it almost feels like you're watching something from the 1930s or 40s. It's really, beautifully done.
Yes. And Mary, your 3 reasons for recommending this movie for somebody who has not watched it yet.
So it is an amazing take on a love story. If you're not into traditional rom-coms, perhaps this could be the love story for you. It has a fantastic cast, Sally Hawkins, Octavia Spencer, Michael Stuhlbarg, Michael Shannon. So really, really strong cast. And if you like something that's a little bit magic and a little bit requires, some imagination, this is definitely a movie worth watching.
Right, right. And how would you like to comment on the CGI effects? I mean, the movie was, of course, about a creature that does not exist. It's a fantasy movie. But we don't see much of CGI involved in it, and it gives a very natural sort of feeling while watching it. So how would you comment on that?
So absolutely, similar to Del Toro's earlier films, such as Pan's Labyrinth and The Devil's Backbone, he relies on practical effects and practical makeup, and that's what you see realised with Doug Jones as the creature. And I think it adds a more human element to it, because you're not relying on something that's clearly come from green screen. There is a person behind the mask and the makeup, and it allows those emotions to carry over a lot more.
Right. Mary, it was wonderful discussing this movie with you. Thank you very much indeed for being with us.
Thank you for your time.
That was Mary Palmer reviewing Shape of Water. And that is it from today's episode. We hope you liked it. Don't forget to share your feedback on the social media link mentioned down below. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care and goodbye.